Murdorf and the Mortal Flaw, Book 1, Chapter 6, A Story to Tell. Nuvatian eagerly rolled out of bed at the crack of dawn. His arm ached with excruciating pain. As he changed his bandage, he realized he had done a shoddy job stitching up the cut. But he wrapped it tightly and hoped for the best. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds remained like a bad omen. After dressing, he hurried down to the horse stalls on the first floor of his house. No time for coffee, he thought. The house was made of granite, stone, finely crafted with character and grace. The 2- and 3-story homes were adjoined to one another, one resident to the right and another to the left. Beneath the homes, on what would be the first floor, were the stables for the horses and a large storage room for carriages, saddles, and such. There was an additional entryway at the front of each home, with steps leading directly into the home bypassing the stables. Behind the homes were pastures for the livestock. Anxious to inform the others of the happenings the night before, Nuvatian skipped breakfast, threw his saddle on the king's horse, and rode off, this time donned in mail, prepared for anything. A dense fog blanketed the land, and dew covered the ground. The cloudy sky showed few signs of withholding its moisture, though for the time being it was restraining itself. As he rode through the streets, all was quiet, not a soul was stirring. Nuvatian stopped in front of a house that looked a lot like his, except the rockwork was less fancy. He sprang off his horse and knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. "Nimri!" he called out as he pounded the door. Still no answer. He walked to the home next door. He knocked and yelled, "Cosby!" He picked up a small pebble and tossed it at an upstairs window, pelting the pane with the small stone. He picked up another pebble and tossed it at the same window, then another and another. The 4th pebble he tossed harder, breaking the glass. "Oops," muttered Nuvatian. With crusty eyes and hair standing on end, Cosby peered out the window. "What are you doing breaking my window, mate?" "You wouldn't answer the door." Cosby now walked down the steps and opened the door. "You'd better have a good reason for breaking my window and waking me up at the crack of dawn." Nuvatian interrupted. "Oh, it's good all right." Letting himself in, Nuvatian recalled the events of the previous night. "Riders of Quadar? You've got to be kidding." "Hurry up and get dressed," Nuvatian said, turning towards the door. "Where are you going?" "Well, to wake up Nimri." "You going to throw a boulder through his window too?" "If that's what it takes." After much pounding, Nimri finally stumbled to the door with his one eye open and one shut. "Get dressed," Nuvatian ordered, staring at Nimri in his underwear. "Well, good morning to you too," Nimri said, not exactly jumping at the order. But the minute Nuvatian explained, Nimri's eyes sprang wide open. "Coffee first." Nimri strolled over to make some coffee. "Don't even think about it. Just get dressed." Reluctantly, Nimri obeyed his biting command and threw on some clothes. Nimri and Cosby saddled their horses and rode off down the foggy street, still wanting for people. The cobblestone streets turned into dirt roads, winding and leading to the middle of nowhere. Then they took a narrow trail down a cul-de-sac, a squirrel racing up a tree, toting its early morning snack, an acorn, in its mouth. Twines of grapevine rolled around a fence and up a post, providing privacy for an already secluded spot. At the end of the cul-de-sac stood a charming home built of huge stone. Nuvatian rapped on the door, but again no answer. He knocked again a little louder. He waited. Then he bumped it again a little harder. Finally, Navi stumbled to the door, rubbing his blurry eyes, another man trying to discern reality from the land of dreams. Running his hand over his ruffled hair, Navi forced open one sleepy eye as he sprang open the door. His green and purple braids had been taken down and mingled wildly with the rest of his hair. Standing silent in his dragon-printed pajamas, he tried to wet his dry mouth with saliva to muster up a word or two. "Hey, crony," he slurred. "Come in." Caught by surprise at Navi's childish-looking pajamas, Nuvatian giggled. "What, you've never seen dragon pajamas before?" Navi asked. My grandmother made them for me. What, when you were 10? Cracked Nuvatian. Or did she forget that you're a grown man now, or at least a replica of one? Whatever are you doing wearing that ridiculous mail? Navi asked. Navi disliked mail, believing it to slow the warrior down and wear him out. But Nuvatian was already familiar with Navi's ways. Navi held an advantage that Nuvatian didn't possess as a prophet. Mail would only cramp his style and his reputation. Riders of Quadar, answered Nuvatian bluntly. What? Exclaimed Navi, now alert. How do you know? He said, as he moved towards the back of the house, motioning for Nuvatian to follow him. They walked into a room where Inca lay snoring on the floor. The pad and pillow that lay beside him indicated that Navi had slept there. Inca was a sapphire dragon, a small and tameable version of the species. They are one of the only plant-eating dragons in existence, but make no mistake, they are no less ferocious than other dragons. They are fiercely loyal to their riders, a trait missing from other dragon breeds. Although their main diet consists of plants, they also eat dried lizards and salamanders. Inca's violet blue scales and yellow eyes made him suitable for Nava, who was a huge fan of the color purple. Devoted friends, together, they made a formidable team. So, your dragon sleeps inside with you? Nuvatian was a bit surprised. Yes, as a matter of fact, he does. You got a problem with that, crony? No, cracked Nuvatian. But we've got to get you a girl, mate. Navi sprung open the big doors and prodded Inca to get moving. In a slumber, the dragon rose, stretched, and strolled outside. Nuvatian now followed Navi, still trying to explain the events of the previous night. As the young prophet went into his bedroom, he shut the door behind him, almost slamming it into Nuvatian's face. Nuvatian talked through the door while Navi changed clothes. I was coming home from the castle last night in the rain when I saw a rider under the lightning of the sky. He pursued me and others joined him. How many? Asked Navi. Several, answered Nuvatian. Navi came out of his room wearing brown riding pants, brown leather boots, his purple rag around his head, and his purple and green strands neatly braided with beads in place. In his hand was his dull purple prophet's hat. In a quick moment, he had changed from his childish clothing, settled his ruffled hair, and gotten a sparkle in his eye. He grabbed his sword and strapped it to his side, then grabbed a few apples sitting on the countertop and shoved them inside his bag that he swung over his shoulder. Well, that was quick. How did you do that so fast? I'm a seer, remember? Navi said, laughing. Let's go, he said, tossing Nuvatian a red apple, chomping into one himself. Navi and Nuvatian walked outside, chewing on their apples. Morning, scamps, said Navi, tossing Nimri and Cosby an apple apiece. He leapt onto Inca, and the dragon shifted his weight, sending him toppling over the other side and onto the ground. To his misfortunes, he was unable to hold onto his apple. Inca gobbled it up. Nuvatian, Cosby, and Nimri roared at Navi's lying face down in the dirt. Moody, bloody dragon, Navi said, curling his upper lip. Now, jumping to his feet, he pulled 2 more large red apples from his bag he had tossed over his shoulder and fed one to Inca, reserving the other one for himself. I was going to give you one anyway. Navi remounted Inca. Let's ride, cronies, he cried, straightening his hat while trying to gain his balance. The 4 rode up a mountain lined with colorful trees, then along the path that led to the military training school. Fetching Gilmanza was essential. He was, after all, not only on the king's court, but was the grand swords master and leader overseeing all the training of men with swords. He also supervised much of the training in the martial arts, making sure that those who became warriors were equipped to meet the demands of the task. Gilmanza lived on the premises, a benefit for one so esteemed. When they arrived, he was sipping herbal tea on the balcony overlooking the valley. Morning, crony, Navi said, strolling through the gate that led onto the stone patio. What brings you 4 out here this early? Would you like some hot tea? No, thanks, Nuvatian answered politely. Don't mind if I do, crony. Do you have some balsamic tea? said Navi. Nuvatian's glowering stare called them back to the importance of their purpose. We don't have time for sipping tea. Quaidarists are near the city. I saw them last night. Warriors from Quaidar? Gamonza repeated. His eyes looked as though they were conjuring up memories of an age that had come to pass, times of long ago. He set down his tea and walked inside. Minutes later he appeared, geared up and ready to ride. Gamonza mounted his horse and joined them. They rode down the mountain, the fog having lifted, and veered off to the left down a dirt path shaded with many trees and garnished with rocks. Amid a circle of trees lay a small stone house of ordinary design. It had a rustic look. A broken wood rail lay across the side of the porch. Though the morning was not cold, as most would measure, a steam of smoke came from the chimney. The riders tied up their mounts and rapped on the door. In just a couple of seconds the door sprang open, as if anticipating their arrival. "Come in," said Windsor. His long silver hair hung down over his shoulders, and a puff of smoke rose from his long and slender pipe. Silently he sat down in his wood-carved rocking chair near the fireplace, motioning for his guests to sit down. Beside the rocking chair stood a small oak table, an open scroll of ancient prophecies upon it. "We must," Nuvatian started to speak, but was silenced as Windsor waved his hand, motioning him to quit talking. He stroked his still beard as though deep in thought. "This is that which was spoken of through the prophets," said a voice from within his lips, moving with his thoughts, but no sound coming forth from his lips. Behind him was a shelf filled with scrolls, parchments bound together as books, and dusty sheets of papyrus. They all sat speechless for a few moments as Windsor puffed on his pipe, blowing a series of smoke rings. He picked up a tattered piece of parchment with writing on it and placed it inside the pocket of his jacket beside him. Gamonza finally broke the silence. "Riders of Quaidar, they are here in the outskirts of Sayir." "Yes, I know," Windsor said, taking a sip of his steaming coffee. "You know? How do you know?" asked Nuvatian. "I saw one last night." "Where?" "Down my road. I was standing on the front porch just after dark. Just as the rain began, I saw him." "What happened?" Nuvatian asked. "Nothing." "Nothing?" questioned Cosby. Windsor's thoughts were clear, but his mind seemed to be in ages past. "He drew his sword with a red blade and waved it at me, just before he rode off on his black horse." He looked over at Gamonza knowingly. "A red blade? You mean the blade itself was red?" asked Nuvatian. "Yes." "Why didn't you go out there and cut him down?" Memory asked enthusiastically. Windsor blew a smoke ring and looked at him. "In time you will trade in some of your zeal for wisdom. At least I hope." This silenced Nimri, at least for now. "Why do you suppose he rode off as opposed to trying to fight?" asked Nuvatian. "Because he just wanted me to know he is here," Windsor said. He stood up and picked up his sword, sitting on the mantel. "And so am I," replied Windsor. He stroked his cheek that bore the scar. "So am I." Then he strapped the steel sword to his side. "Who was he?" Nuvatian inquired. "Let's just say an old acquaintance." He picked up his pipe and took a long draw from it. Gamonza studied Windsor. He knew who the rider was. "But tell me, how is it that you have learned the Quaidarists are in Sayir?" asked Windsor. "I encountered a group of them last night as I was riding home from the castle," answered Nuvatian. Windsor blew smoke rings casually, not allowing himself to hurry. He walked into his bedroom and pulled off his shirt. The two big scars across his back were a constant reminder of the tragic day he lost a part of himself, the day his people lost their glory. Picking out a clean shirt, Windsor dressed, put on his riding boots, finished sipping his coffee, and grabbed his riding jacket and gear. Then he picked up the scrolls and tucked them away in his brown leather satchel. After a long pause and a few more puffs on his pipe, he opened the door and yelled, "Blaze!" Almost instantly, a small blue and gold dragon dropped in front of his house. It too was a sapphire dragon. To the king, mates, Windsor said, taking his rightful position as leader.